you see on the screen the string theory with a new interpretation can model the mind, such as observed by introspection. This is the conclusion of 8 years of work for me. I'm not a scientist, so I have not done a scientific work, but I am a concept engineer, and I have made a concept analysis on work done by scientists. So I will present for you some conclusions of this work I have done. The string theory is the most recognized theory of everything, as they say. It's a particle theory, and it's been developed by several thousands of physicists during several decades. To model something in physics, it means to describe by mathematical equations. And the mind, we have no common explanation or understanding of the mind today. But I'll base my analysis on this understanding of the mind, which is developed by medical doctors and psychiatrists in connection with teaching and understanding meditation. They made a meditation psychology, they call it, and that includes an understanding of the mind. And I have transformed this understanding into something that I can connect to string theory. Yeah. The first, we have to take a big leap from mainstream understanding, the mainstream culture. And I assume that the mind is a container. That's a definition of the word. The mind is a container for non-physical entities, such as thoughts, memories, personality, telepathy, God, and whatever is there. And this is compared to the physical universe, which also, physical universe is also a container, and this contains physical entities. So they are, mind and physical universe is comparable in that respect. So, non-physical, what's that? If it's real, if there is something which is non-physical, it must be a basic property akin to matter, space, and time. Non-physical phenomena must be made of non-physical particles. Particles are studied and modeled by particle physics. So we will look into particle physics. The standard model is the model which all the physicists are very satisfied with. that model. It's simple to use, and it describes almost all elementary particles except gravity. This model cannot model gravity. It includes quantum mechanics, and all particles are assumed to be like points that have no extension. All physicists know that this theory is not the final one, because it doesn't include gravity. There must be something else. I have used string theory. You see, it can include all elementary particles, including gravity. It includes quantum mechanics and the theory of relativity. It's embedded in a large mathematical framework, which is difficult to handle because there are so many different equations, and you have to do a lot of approximations to use these equations. And the starting assumption is that all elementary particles are strings. They can be ring-shaped strings. They are, according to quantum mechanics, they have to vibrate. They cannot be silent or cannot be still. And they can be open strings like this, like a violin string. And so why doesn't physicists use this model when they work with particle physics? There are two reasons for that. First reason is that it's very difficult to use. And the second reason is that there are so many requirements to the real world that they cannot find this requirement in the real world. And we see what these requirements are. The strings must vibrate in 9 different directions. Our universe has only 3 directions. And so they never found how this 9 dimensions can be real. The second, there must be many more different particles. If string theory is correct, there must be many more different types of particles than we have been able to detect. Branes must be real. The open strings have to hang on to something in their ends. And these items are called branes. They can be surfaces, or they can be spaces, and they can be simple strings, but there must be something which the strings hold on to in both ends. And string theorists don't really know what this is. They have proposed that our universe is a brane. So all known particles hang on to our universe with both ends, and they can vibrate. And they could maybe vibrate into other branes. That's my conclusion. And almost all physical particles are open, modeled by open strings. It's only the gravity which is modeled by a closed string. So that's very special. And that might be also the reason why the standard model cannot model gravity, because it's so different from the other particles. And the last, the last requirement is, if you have heard about M theory, that's the most advanced part of string theory, there must be one extra dimension which is called coupling strength. And they never found out how they can make a dimension which is a coupling strength. So if you read in the literature, you find that the 11th dimension is just a space dimension. And this is a traditional way of explaining the 7 extra dimensions. They say they are curled up, and this is how they curl up the dimensions. And they do it into such a small volume. If the curled up dimensions are so small that they cannot be measured or verified, then the theory matches observations. And this is accepted by all string theories. It's a bit funny, but that's the way they do it. And how do we curl up a dimension? If you look at the dimension from far, then it's only one direction. Each dimension has only one direction. But if you go very close, let's say, the dimension may be a tube, and then you can walk around this tube. So you have one more dimension. And if you curl up 7 dimensions, you get a figure like this. This was also presented in another presentation. But this is string theorists have made this figure, and it shows how you can curl up. And this curling up of dimensions can be done in incredibly high amount of ways. So you get, for each way of curling up the dimensions, you get different physical conditions. And they never found the physical laws from this that matches our universe. So that 210 up to the 500, that's incredible high number. So what I have done, I interpret string theory in a different way. I say that, okay, our universe is a brane, like suggested by the string theorists. And I also suggest that there are two other branes, three-dimensional branes. So there will be one physical space and two non-physical spaces. And then you get 9 different dimensions and 9 ways of vibrating the strings. Particles required by string theory and not found in the physical branes can be found in the non-physical branes. So that meets that requirement. Branes having different kind of particles must have different physical laws. That's the theory from string theory. Consequently, different branes have different measurement unit for distance. And this is very new thought. No physicists have thought of the possibility of this. So but physics is closing into such conclusions now, because they're starting to see what vacuum is. And I say that space itself is a quality of the physical laws. So space, as we see it, that's a part of the physical universe. And there might be other universes that have different measurement of distance. So if you take these 3 universes, and because they are around us everywhere, all of them, and you combine them, then you get a cosmos, which I call it, including 3 universes. So string theory is able to model a cosmos that includes 3 universes. So what are the consequences of this? There is there is only one string theory solutions. So they get away with all the different ways of curling up the dimensions. A string can vibrate in all branes at the same time. It is 9 independent directions of vibrations. The extra particles required by string theory can be observed as dark matter and dark energy being located to the parallel non-physical branes. So we have a measurement verifying these assumptions. String theory says that we cannot measure the content of all the branes except for gravity. Gravity is this circular string that can wander, travel between branes. So gravity can interact between the branes, but no other force can act between branes. That's a consequence of string theory. So we cannot see light from other branes, and particles from different branes cannot collide, because that's the electromagnetic force that makes things collide. Measurement of dark matter and dark energy supports string theory and the existence of parallel universes. We have dark matter is measured in the universe. It's measured around the world, around the Earth, in the different what do you call it? And in the empty space, it's also measured dark matter, because the bending of light, they have seen bending of light made by dark matter. So they have made a map out of a tiny part of the empty cosmos and found dark matter like this. And dark energy that is spread evenly throughout the universe. It's quite the same amount of dark energy all places in the universe. Okay, now we have explained all the requirements from string theory by this new definition of how to interpret string theory. There's only one left, and we'll go into that afterwards. But first, we'll look into what the mind is. Introspection is when you shut your eyes and direct your attention inwards. And everything you can observe. The first thing you observe when closing your eyes is perhaps sounds from the room you sit in. Secondly, after some time, there starts to come psychological contents from your memories, things you should have done maybe, and things that caused some emotional stir in you, maybe a quarrel or something, strong images in the mind, memories, they start to come, and a lot of those psychological things. There is a difference between what is spontaneous and what is volitional. What you can do with your mind, something you can decide to do in your mind, and something you have no master, you cannot master it. Everything that comes to your mind, comes into your attention, that's spontaneous. You can't do anything with it. It comes by itself. It comes from the mind somewhere. What you can do is two things only. You can direct your attention. I can look at one of you at a time. That's volitional. And I can open my mind and see all of you at one time. So I can direct attention, and I can open or close the attention. You can't do more than that. That's what you can master in your mind. Otherwise you can try to suppress things, and that works very well, but it hurts your mind. Why do this? I call this a psychological room, the container for everything which is in your mind. And in this meditation psychology, we have defined that the mind contains residues. And each residue contains thoughts, feelings, images, self-images, and a worldview. That's a residue for each time in your life you make a residue. If it's not charged, it's a plain memory. If there is a charge, there is a, what do you call it? It's unfinished. It's very unfinished, and it's charged, and it can attract your attention. If this is your attention, and here are different residues with different strengths, different charge, then if there is a strong charge, it tries to attract your attention. It comes easily into your mind if there is some unfinished matter. So, if your attention goes into a residue, then you relive this moment of your life. You are in that moment in a way. You see all the images and all the thoughts, and your self-image takes the self-image that was exactly at that moment. And your worldview takes the worldview that was in that moment. And you are given a second chance to reduce the strength of this charge. And that's the way how meditation works. It gives you a second chance to reduce stress. And it supports a natural mental digestion of your residues. So, we understand it in this way, that there is this psychological room has a part mind of itself. The rational mind is connected to the physical world, and the magico-metaphysical part mind is connected to the psychological room. This metaphysical part mind is what babies are born with. They are not rational. They live in a magical world in a way, and that's what we start with. And we have to develop our rational mind as we mature. Dreams occur when our total attention is embedded in this psychological room. Then we have no connection with the rational mind and the physical world, So then dreams start to come out, and the distance in this room we could call emotional distance. I think we know what this is, all of us. The distance between the residues, they are emotional in a way that associated residues are very close. You can go from one residue to another if they are emotional close. And the thoughts of our friends and family members, they are also very close to us in this space. We all have, it's one in the universe, and all minds are part of this universe. So the thoughts of other people, they are in this universe, and people that are close to us, emotional close, their thoughts and minds are not very far off. So then we have a dimension in this second brain, and the distance is emotional distance. And there is also a second room, internal room. I call it the internal room. You can come in touch with that. And this situation is shown here in front of a fireplace. And if you go hiking in a mountain, you get a view, then you become kind of still. The time disappears. There's not a normal conception of time. You get still, and the thoughts have no content in a way. There are thoughts, but they are very different. So it's a different room with different thoughts, and the content is very different from the psychological room. These thoughts we can call non-phenomenal. They don't contain phenomena. So they are difficult to catch because they are kind of nothing for us. If we live in a rational world, these thoughts are nothing because they are so vague. They are just yeah. But if you try to implement an idea or something, intuition or what we call it, then you may have to work for a long time to get to feel that what you're doing, it resonates with something in you. And it will resonate with an idea or an intuition, some kind of these thoughts. These thoughts can be manifest in your life, and sometimes it's very difficult to do it because you may try out a lot of different things to feel that it resonates with the intuition. Einstein used 10 years to make his general relativity, and he had an idea of here is something, but he had to work for it for a very long time to get a good match. Mozart made a melody in 2 minutes. He got all of it like a snap and just had to write it down. So this is a part of our mind. It's non-phenomenal. The thoughts are non-phenomenal, but they are real. They contain everything of an item and no specificities. It's not specific, but they contain all possibilities of this complex which they represent. And we can say that an idea or an intuitional thought collapses into time and space when we have realized it. And if we are able to realize a lot of these thoughts, these non-phenomenal thoughts in our life, then we will be satisfied in a way. We feel we have lived a good life. If we are able to convert a lot of these higher thoughts into our life in some way. It can be a design, it can be writing a novel, it can be art, and it can be raising a family, it can be a lot of things. In this space, there is a structure which we can call personality. It helps us to make objects out of chaos. If you see a chair, you see it's a chair because there is a structure in your personality that says, okay, these things are called chairs. And it's the same for all of us. And we have more advanced structures as you use in psychology and understand all the people and things. They are also structures like part of your personality. And there's, if there's something in the connection with other people and in the world which you don't understand, then the personality is insufficiently developed. You have no structure for these signals you receive. And there is also a body or identity in this space we could call the timeless self. This space is kind of timeless, but there is a self which we can feel an identity with. And this space is more influenced by our actions, the result of our actions, than by our thoughts. It's what we do have a consequence in this space. It might influence the personality. It might clog up the personality in a way if you do things that are not good. If you do things that are good, then it takes away these clogs and things. Some call these clogs are called sin, some call it sin, and some call it karma. There are many different ways of seeing this, but there are some structures that we can make more of it, and we can reduce it. If we do neutral things, if we act neutrally, then we can reduce these disturbing structures. If you are in deep sleep, your attention is completely in this room. But we are usually not sufficiently, this timeless self is usually not sufficiently developed to be awake in this room. In India, to be awake while you are asleep is called yoga nidra. So it's possible. And during very long retreats, you can have moments of this wake sleep. But there is kind of nothing in it. It's empty, but you are able to be awake because you can receive these non-phenomenal thoughts and be with them. And the distance in this room, you can see it's a difference between personalities. It's kind of quality difference or personality difference. If you have a good chemistry with a person, then you have personalities that match. That's a usual way of saying it. And you can have a good close personalities without being emotional close and without being physical close. So there are three different distances you can have to other persons. These non-phenomenal thoughts, if you talk to a quantum physicist, he would say, oh, these are quantum waves. They are spread out, things that contain a complete set of expression of a certain idea or something. And they can, probability waves, quantum waves can collapse into a particle or into something in the real world. They used to say that the collapse of a quantum item occurs when consciousness comes to it. That's a normal understanding. But I have a slightly different understanding. The quantum wave can collapse so that it's adapted to the time and space where it collapses to. it will adapt itself, it will take out the parameters that matches the time and space whereto it collapses. And if one person has a good idea, then he will do a certain thing according to that idea. Another person in another time, another place, may get the same idea, and it turns out to be quite something different. But the result of this idea, in the two cases, they have the same quality. They promote the same quality in a way, in both ways, even if they are very different, manifested in the real world. So we have three worlds, we have three universes, and we have three bodies. We have the personality, the timeless self, is in one universe. Residues, I call it emo body, emotional body, whatever, it's just a name. And there is, I think it seems to be a copy of the physical body, in a way. It's there. That's one of the things you can find there. And it's a psychological universe. We have the physical universe, of course, there. This makes up dark energy, which is 68% of the cosmos. This makes up dark matter, which is 27% of the cosmos, and the physical matter is under 5%. These are measurements that are made. And so, according to string theory, the particles in these spaces must be incredibly much more heavy or more energetic than the physical particles. So it's natural that this higher, there's some, these are primary, which make this, which make this. And this is ideas according to a lot of other people in this room. And we have even different treatments. We have psychodynamic psychology, treats this personality. Cognitive psychology treats these things, and medical science treats these things. And what is soul? Could we call this the soul, and the spirit, this is spirit? I don't know. But these things, from introspection, these units, this item seems to be real. So, this is how far we came with explaining string theory. We have satisfied all the requirements of string theory, except this extra dimension, which is called coupling strength. And now we will see how we can explain this extra dimension. There was some research. There has not been much research on time. But there was some, in Science, there was an article in 1991, and several scientists, neurologists, I think they were, and they had found a 40 Hertz vibration in the brain, which they suggested should be indicating number of nows per second. You are conscious in now. You are, so that we are conscious 40 independent moments each second. That's it. And in the 1950s and 60s, there was some research on this in Germany. And a couple of people came up with this curve. They had measured, I think it was through the eyes or something, I don't know how they came up to this. But and now, for a baby, it's much longer than for a 20-year boy. And when you grow old, the nodes get much longer also. So this curve came up. And there has been no research on this ever since that I know of. So I think it's remarkable that now nobody has been interested in these things. And if the mind observes as a film camera, time per image and duration of its duration. And now that's called the sampling time. That makes up the speed of time. If you see it like this, if you have normal time perception, each now goes like this. If you have a shorter sampling time of the mind, then there are a lot of nows per second, and the time passes slowly. If the sampling time is very long, then time passes faster because there are fewer nows per second. What's mine? Yeah. From meditation, we have experienced how time goes fast and slow. In the Auger meditation, which I represent, we have something called free attitude, free open attitude. And that contrasts what is experienced in war, where you have concentration. During an assault, many soldiers have seen that you go into kind of slow motion. Things go very slow. And there's a lot of people who have experienced this. And that's a deep concentration. If you, during meditation, you can experience that time goes very fast. So that's the opposite of concentration, an open mind. So we get a line here with concentration, time passes slowly, and you have free open mental attitude, time passes very fast. So that could be a dimension. And it's a dimension in that your attention can go along it without going along any other dimension. And that, I think, is a definition of dimension, a reference to the mind. That's how many directions can your attention wander along without wandering along the other dimensions. So that's the 11th dimension of string theory. It's a volitional activity. You can decide between limits how much you concentrate and how much open mind you have. If you go to the infinite concentration, then you have very slow speed of time. It goes down to a particle perspective. If you concentrate so much that you get a view of a particle, then you have a very strong coupling, and that was what was asked from string theory. It should be a dimension that represented coupling. Here we see that if we go along this dimension, we're wandering the speed of time. It's represents speed of time. It represents the perspective, have a cosmic perspective or a small perspective, and it represents coupling. If you go to the other end of concentration, infinitely free mental attitude, then you get a cosmic perspective. You perceive all the cosmos. Time passes very fast. You have a very weak coupling. You don't couple to anything specific. And it's kind of singularity, because you never get to all time. There's always some time more. You go into kind of singularity. And this is what some people refer to as the mystic experience, could be. There are no phenomena. That's what the mystics say. There's nothing to tell about it. But it's something real, and it's something immensely important. You experience all in one. If you experience all in one, you can't be very directed on details. You must have everything. And that's kind of, there's a dimension where you can go into, call it eternity or whatever. Now we have solved totally the problems of string theory. So, if we have separate minds in these separate universes, we have to have signals going between the different bodies, and there must be a very good communication between the brain and the mind. If the brain is there and the mind is there, there has to be very good communication. If the emotions are here and we feel the emotions through our nervous system, there has to be some communication from the emotions here to the brain. And that's something I call gravity snapping. We know that the gravity can transfer between the brains, between the universes. Gravity can go from one universe, it can act from one universe to another. So matter in two universes, they can attract each other. Yeah. And how can then gravity transfer signals? The gravity force is extremely weak for small units. If you have two units there, they cannot attract each other. And if you have two physical particles, they will not attract each other by gravity. But if you get zero distance, give very strong force, force is this constant divided by the square of the distance between these two. So if you have a non-physical particle here and you have a physical particle there, the non-physical particle can go into the physical particle without being expelled, because the electromagnetic force in this does not act on this particle. So it can take the same volume and be at the same location as this, and then this distance between them go to zero, and the force can increase immensely. So if these particles go together, they will snap into each other and they will hang together in a way with a certain force. So emotions are felt in the muscles. We feel emotions sitting in the stomach. We are anxious. We feel aggression sitting in the jaws, aggressive. So the different emotions we detect by the muscles. So emotions, we can say that muscles are receptors for emotions in some way. Yes, and if the emotions sit in non-physical matter, they can snap. This matter can snap to the nervous system in the muscles and make an impact, signal impact on this nervous system, so that the signal goes to the brain and we feel the emotions. And likewise, epigenetics, no one can explain how psychological structures can influence the genes. But if you use this gravity snapping from non-physical objects or whatever, there is a possibility that your psychological forces can change these genes by taking one and one. I don't know the mechanism, but there is a force, there is a possibility that this can happen. All the people have to explain the details. The connection between the brain and the mind is very complex, and it goes both ways. So the gravity snapping is not cannot very easily explain all this different communication. But if you accept that the aura could be a force, it could be a force made by a ring-shaped string, so that it can go from one brain to another. that means that it can interact between the brain, which is physical, and the mind, which is non-physical. So if aura could be seen as a signaling force between the brain and the mind, between physical entities and non-physical entities. And you can look at the brain as a radio transmitter and a receiver, and the aura is the electric signals going out to the mind, and they go signals both ways. So, but the brain, of course, has many important functions by its physics and by its synapses and things, but the memory is never found in the brain. It could be in the mind, which is non-physical, but there has to be a very good communication between the memory and this personality function and these things and the brain. So that then the aura could be the fifth natural force. You have this electromagnetic, strong and weak, and gravity. There are four natural forces. Aura could be the fifth. So if you take this, assume this, then you can have a good communication between the physical representation of us here and the emo body here, everything, memory and emotions and everything, and also the personality and the self. So it's possible to work also when you have these separate universes. So, what time is going?
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah. I could take a bit more, we should have time for questions. The second big leap here is consciousness do not emerge from biological complexity, but rather the opposite. Biological complexity emerges from consciousness. This point of view needs a redefinition of consciousness. Consciousness in some form, at some level, is in control of all sorts of processes in the universe. Consciousness may or may not be self-conscious. So, consciousness may be connected to everything. Every particle could have some kind of consciousness connected to it. And if we look at symmetry breaking, which is a mandatory part of string theory, then there's one particle is broken down symmetrical to other particles. When temperature decreases, then there is a complex particle that will break down and make 3 new particles. So that could be the reason for our physical world. That's broken down from some higher energy. That's a physical universe, psychological universe, and intuitive universe. It can be broken down from some higher state. And if we look at one level above, there could be highest principle, which include all phenomena. It breaks down to identity, identification, and a high form of energy. And this high form of energy breaks down through a Big Bang, down to our 3 worlds. And here we can also try to find out what we would call life energy syntropy on resonance. I think that resonance is maybe due to the distance in this emotional, in this psychological world, because you can get with a small emotional distance, you have a resonance in a way. And syntropy, maybe this is kind of energy, you can call syntropy, I don't know. And life energy is maybe that what we are charged with when we sleep, and that could be aura. But it's depends. And if you look at cosmos, there is one symmetry breakdown to a level here, and then it breaks down to another level. And we have a conglomerate of identities, which is identified with a conglomerate of bodies. And you can get some reincarnation, explain reincarnation out from these three states. If we see a history of understanding, there was a mythological explanation of the world first, and then came philosophy with very probably rational understanding, but not verified against observation. And now we have scientific explanation of almost everything, but mind, spirit, and consciousness and religion is not explained by science. And so this is a scientific gap that will be closed in some time, I think. And we have a worldview which is materialistic mostly, and a mental, spiritual worldview which does not integrate. And if we get a scientific worldview, it could integrate both these worldviews. Okay. More information on the internet, matterofmind.net. I have also a couple of books there. And there is a scientific article, which there is a link on this internet site. You can, it was published in March. So that's, thank you.
How much noise is that?
Pardon?
You helped to answer one thing that puzzled me. You helped to answer something which has puzzled me.
Okay, that's good.
Because one time I was going down the motorway, driving a car, and there was an emergency right in front of me. And I'm going about 70 miles an hour, something like that. And all of a sudden I had to do something. And it's only when I realized that I had plenty of time to do it. But in truth, I only had a fraction of a second. Because the situation was complex, it seemed that time had slowed right down.
Yes.
And it was almost unbelievable that I should have, how did it ever slow down? It seemed that I had plenty of time, when in fact, because I had to concentrate very hard on the difficult situation, everything slowed down, and it's most amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah. A lot of people have this experience.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had two car crash situations where I've experienced extreme slowing down during the moment of cars.
Yeah.
And I do understand it's common. There was another experiment sometime in the 70s about time perception, and it compared workers in intensely repetitive production line work along with people in the same business who had creative managerial roles where they were in control of their own thought processes and time. And it was a very simple test. Against the stopwatch, tell me when 1 minute has gone past. And the production line workers were tended to be close to 30 seconds, whereas the people doing their own creative work and controlling their own time perception were within 5 seconds of correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are several parameters influencing the sense of time. Also, there could be other things, but I think this is at least one parameter that controls the sense of time.
How would you take what you're talking about in terms of the development of the minds and the bodies? Where would you see where trauma? Indirectly. Where do you see trauma being the major interrupter in this model?
Now, this model is more physical, but when you look at the psychological issues, then trauma may disrupt your work because it's so strong. It takes your attention away from what you are doing, and it tenses your muscles. So your muscle gets get tense, and you can't feel your emotions that should be sensed through these muscles. So it disrupts your life in a way with traumas. And that's what our meditation, at least, it tends to dissolve these traumas so that you can live a more normal life.
Yeah, I look at it the other way, that when it's extreme trauma, it completely divorces your attention. You're disassociated. You
Yes, you can suppress it.
Yeah,
You can suppress it. That works also, but
yeah,
it's not good for your health.
yeah. I guess from my vantage point, as I've been listening, I would see the disconnect between the timeless world, okay, and the psychological world.
Yeah.
There isn't that sense. And as I was listening, I'm thinking about how certain interventions that I was able to have are the people that actually built a bridge, literally, in
Yeah.
dreams and in the physical reality of medications. A bridge had to be built between those two universes
Yeah.
and bodies.
Yeah, you can make a lot of different techniques and therapies to mend these things. I'm just explaining what I think is the basic physics in it.
No, I think you explained it extremely well. And I'm just saying that I also see it as a biochemical process, a good physician, as well as psychological, somatic, and so on.
Yeah, because all these things are interconnected in
Yes.
a way. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Regarding your connection between the three types of spaces, right? You have this 9 dimensions at the right. And so does that mean that each particle in our physical universe corresponds one in the other spaces, or is each particle in the physical universe also represented in the 2 other ones?
Yeah, that's symmetrical breaking. A force particle in our universe corresponds to a matter particle in the other universe. And a matter particle in our universe corresponds to a force particle in the other universe. That's how the split is. That's how the string symmetry is broken.